That could be a great way to describe Bennigan's restaurant. I used to eat at Bennigan's all the time down in Bonita Springs. They had a location at the promenade at Bonita Bay. It was great. They had a Monte Cristo sandwich that, I got to be honest with you, was just, I mean, it was just a gastronomic festival of goodness. This was awesome. And then the place closed down. I was like, Bennigan's, one more casualty in the restaurant chain legacy. And, well, not quite. My next guest brought Bennigan's back from Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now 200 restaurants that are either open or under development, and average store sales now tracking 40% higher than its new chief executive officer before he came on board. Paul Mangiamele, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the program this morning. Welcome.
It is my pleasure to join you, and I love shouting from the rooftops how our brands have not only come back into the forefront, but actually are leading casual dining again. So it's a pleasure.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, so there's and I've always wanted to, I was talking to you off air, I've always wanted to get into a restaurant, having a couple of opportunities here to do that. I've been in the nightclub business previously, but the restaurant has always been like, ooh, boy, if you really, really, really want to burn a pile of cash and roll the dice, this is the way to do it. And so there's always, and it seems to be that never-ending struggle between local restaurants and the chains. I have to be honest, I like local flair, but when I travel, I like Ruby Tuesdays, for instance. I tend to seek out the Ruby Tuesdays if they're there because the consistency. And knowing that Bennigan's is coming back, if there's a Bennigan's there, I would absolutely go there because I know what the menu has. I know what the food is like. I recognize that consistency. And I think there's a lot of people when they travel, they seek out their favorite chain because of that consistency. And sometimes, over the local flair. So when you think about all these iconic chains that have come and gone, I remember as a kid, I used to love Arthur Treacher's restaurants, fish and chips. And that's long since. I mean, I think there may be one or two independent locations that are still up and running, but that's pretty much gone the way of the dodo bird. The Howard Johnsons with the coffee ice cream and that iconic macaroni and cheese. You don't see those places anymore. What is it about a restaurant chain that causes it to lose that market share? And to just kind of drop off. I mean, not even drop off into obscurity, but just dissolve entirely. Is it aggressive growth? Is it just stagnation? What's your finger on the pulse with that?
Well, I think the common denominator in all the brands in the past and present and even in the future now will be they lose their culture. They lose the original DNA. They get bought and sold and different people come in and, they put their own twist to the brands. And what it ends up doing most of the times is alienating their core customer base. In Bennigan's case, the bankruptcy really wasn't to do with anything of the brand itself, but it really was a real estate Ponzi scheme that went awry, and they drained the DNA out of the brands and then left them with Chapter 7, which is liquidation. So, but what I found and why my wife and I bought the company and the Steak and Ale, Bennigan's, and Bennigan's on the Fly brands is because we see the deep emotional connection. Because just like what you did when you started out our conversation, where I used to go and I had a great time and I remember the Monte Cristo, that's an emotional connection. And then if you do the algebraic equation that extends that into business, it's that emotional connection equals demand, and demand equals sales. So that wherever we go in that, again, where we are obviously reattaching that emotional connection, we are, looking at revenues that have surpassed even the sales levels that we had in some of the go-go years. And so that DNA is very important to attach again. And of course, then I have put it into a franchise model. So I have, a core group of franchisees that are growing not only domestically but internationally as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you mentioned the emotional connection, because I was doing a program for for a number of people. It wasn't specifically for these individuals, but I had two regional managers for the Publix grocery store chain that happened to be in this program that I was teaching. And so when we were going around the room during a break, and we were talking about, so what do you do? And these two individuals, we're both, regional managers for Publix. And I said, that's cool. I said, I shop there. My Publix is on Summerlin Road in Fort Myers, and they looked at each other and they said, that is exactly what we go for. I said, what do you mean? They said, think about what you just said. You said my Publix. I identify with that store. That is your store. You've claimed ownership of that store. And he said, that is the emotional connection that we seek to make with our customers, and that's one of the reasons why our growth, our expansion, our service is unparalleled in the southern part of the country.
Right. And that was so good to say. So then, if you look at the building blocks, the culture, and again, my deep belief is that culture and people and passion beat strategy and tactics every day of the week. No doubt about it. And then when you can not only establish the restaurant in a community, it becomes their Bennigan. So that's why when we look at the menu, we look at what may be popular to add to the menu for regional flavor and palate. From a beverage standpoint, we do the same thing. And so people identify with their Bennigans. We even have the name of the city over the bar in wherever we build a new Bennigan's, because we want it to be their Bennigan's, not some corporate entity out of Dallas that has no identification with the local community. And we do that from a marketing standpoint as well. So that's very important that you mentioned that, because that's something that is part of a successful brand's DNA.
What is the number one reason why restaurants fail?
That's a great question. I think in the franchising side, the restaurants fail because the franchisees, for whatever reason, and I've only been doing this for 40 years, do not follow the system. There's a tried and true system. Like, for example, in Bennigan's, we were established in 1976. So by Norman Brink, who was an icon and a friend, in and of himself. Same thing with Steak and Ale, 1966 in Dallas, right here. And so they grew their training, they grew their culture, they grew their passion, they grew their execution for gaining market share, obviously from a business standpoint, but also it's a situation where again, back to the emotional connection, they built that around the country. So for me, I know where I need to continue to build my brands, all three of them, because the emotional connection that is pent-up demand has always been in existence, and so I want to reattach those connections. But when franchisees fail to execute the system, they go under. When operators of an independent start to save their way to profitability, they go under. It's not a really big mystery. It's when you get away from the basic, sound business precepts of quality food, quality service, quality vibe, because I like to refer to Bennigan's actually as a retro contemporary, right? Because it's still nostalgic, but you got to be smart enough to bring it into the 21st century from a look, a feel, the trade dress, so that the vibe is still very strong.
Yeah.
When people stop investing in their brands, there becomes this insidious disease called defection and brand drift. And today, with the proliferation of so many restaurants and eating establishments, you just can't afford to take your foot off the gas.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the product and the service, two things that are absolutely dependent upon good, quality, reliable help. And the reason I wanted to pull you on here was because I recently was reading about this. This is kind of fascinating now. Not necessarily, when I say like sit down, dining restaurants like a Bennigan's, for instance, but the fast food places, Checkers and Church's Chicken, Pizza Hut, places like that. So now, in an attempt to try to attract talent, to attract workers and retain those workers, there's a new concept that's starting to emerge: same day and next day paychecks. This seems to be like this is a recipe for disaster, at least in my estimation. A person works, okay, so I do my 8 hours, and then at the end of that day or the next day, I'm paid for that 8 hours worth of work. I'm basically getting 5 paychecks a day. Number one, I can't imagine the amount of paperwork that would go into that. But more appropriately, now, because you look at that steady stream of income that's coming in on a day-to-day basis, as a matter of fact, the chief executive officer of Church's Chicken, Joe Christina, said it will give the employees a chance to get spending money quicker. Generally speaking, if you're looking at restaurant workers, unless they're high school kids, you hear these people talking about, well, I can't have a living wage working at a fast food restaurant. Well, that's not spending money. That's money that you need for rent or for your car payment or your car insurance or your cell phone bill or, food for your kids. I don't see how that's a smart idea. And I wanted to get your perspective on that plan. Is that ill thought out?
Well, in the fast food side, yeah, the competition for people is as fierce as it's ever been. And like I said, I've been doing this for 4 decades. So I'm looking out at, the low unemployment, the ability to attract and retain good people, which goes all the way back to culture, by the way. I mean, a lot of these kids that are looking for jobs are looking for, especially these last few generations, are looking for, what does the brand stand for? And why would I be proud to put on that uniform and come to work? And so, yeah, so you're looking at different organizations now doing a myriad of different things to try to get their pay, which they think that is the number one motivation, which in some cases it absolutely is. But are they proud to come to that establishment wherever it is? Is it being run right? Do they have great management? Do they offer a career, opportunity? Going into, different levels of supervision. I mean, when I first started, and it was like, look, I was a server, and I made, my paycheck was every day because I got cash, I got tips. And that's what I love about full service, because, the server and the bartender, they have money every day. Now, the back of the house folks, they do get it in every 2 weeks, but again, they always have been making more than minimum wage. They always have been. The problem really is that nobody really talks about. It's not making that $10 an hour. It's the cook that's been with you for 5 years that's just now making $10 an hour. And so, well, wait a minute. There's an inequality when you're giving somebody off the street, a higher wage, and then at the sacrifice of some of the people that have been with you for a long time. Excuse me. So you have to balance all that out and be fair and just. But also you have to give people an environment that they're proud to work in, and management that trains and looks at cross-training and retention. And a lot of times it just becomes a kind of a machinery where they're just burning and churning, not looking at the deeper-rooted problem within that organization, but they're just trying to address symptoms. And I think some of that is that, immediate cash every day, or, 3 times a day, or whatever they decide to do.
Paul, I've only got about 60 seconds left here, but I wanted to wrap up on the question which I think a lot of people have asked about and have had conversations about, and that is automation and artificial intelligence in the especially in the restaurant industry, the ability to automate with kiosks or having an electronic ordering system right there at the table, so it eliminates the need. It allows the restaurant operator or owner to cut down on the number of human beings that they're employing, and increase efficiency, increase customer satisfaction, decrease the rates of shrinkage and theft, underringing, things like that. What are your thoughts on automation here, quickly, and how soon before we start to see a revolution in terms of automation and AI taking over the food service industry?
Yeah, let me first say that it's not so much a revolution, it's an evolution, because in the QSR, on the fast food side of it, I can absolutely see where robotics will come to play, not in every position, obviously, but in some. I think the just the force of nature will demand that niche of fast food comes up with better production systems to lower their labor costs. On the other side of it, in our full service, full bar, sit down service, I will never go to automation. I don't like the ordering tablets on the table, because the emotional connection that I refer to happens because of people. And it's really about having good people doing the right things, because they become the ambassadors of your brand. And then those guests become ambassadors of your brand. And then you and I both know that the word of mouth is the most powerful marketing tool out there.
Indeed.
And it also builds retention when you do the training and the cross training. And so you look up. So I think we are right now focusing more on the cross training and the efficiencies in the back of the house and the front of the house. But we make everything from scratch. And so there's again, these are the basic tenets of how we run our operation, because we want people and our brands to be indispensable to our consumer group. So for us, it's really that personal touch and the quality of the food, the portion of food, the value proposition. In fast food, I can absolutely see, or airport operation, I can absolutely see, it's really the ticket time. how fast can I get my food from when I order? And they're going to have to look at different methodologies in order to ensure that.
Paul, I'm going to have to leave it right there. Unfortunately, Paul Mangiamele, the Chief Executive Officer of Bennigan's. You can check out their website at bennigans.com and find a location near you, especially if you happen to be traveling. And I do highly recommend that Monte Cristo. Is a phenomenal, phenomenal meal. Paul, thanks so much for being a part of the program, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Be well.